Hello.
Okay, the show starts. A very good morning, everybody. Everybody is here. There's not yet so many people, but I'm sure they will be coming in. Welcome very much to this session on climate justice and urban food systems, putting the theory into practice, putting ideals into practice. But like I said, I'm hoping some more people will come in, but maybe as a starter we can just tell the audience which cities are here. Maybe you can hear some cities. Where are you from? I know that there's Rosario here, Birmingham. I know Quito is coming. She left, but she's coming back. Bristol. Denmark, but that's not a city, eh? Rio de Janeiro, of course. Milano. Okay, we have some. Baltimore. Thank you very much. So for the audience that is listening in, I'm not sure if that is possible today because there were some difficulties there, but we know where the cities are. So my name is René van Veenhuizen. I'm from the Netherlands, from Hivos, and coordinator for the RUAF Foundation. RUAF Global Partnership Secretariat. Together with Sami Kua of Mazingira Institute, who is a RUAF partner, we will facilitate this session. So please, let's sit down and we can start the session. Just an idea, the RUAF Global Partnership is a conglomerate, a network, a community of practice of different organizations, research organizations, NGOs, and cities, of course, not in the least. Cities that share experiences on urban agriculture and global food systems. And this is the group that has organized this session. The focus of the session today is to explore, to have a discussion amongst each other. What does it mean, climate justice? What does it mean in a practical, for cities, in a programmatic perspective? How do we do it together with our local governments and in our citizens? How do we put it in practice? Is it something new? Is it something we are already doing for a long time? So the aims of the session are on understanding the topic, what does it mean, sharing experiences, and not only from cities but also from partners of RUAF on how this is addressed in a number of projects. So the setup of the session is, as you can see, it's in 4 blocks. We have a short introduction to start discussing the topic, to get our brains working on what does it mean, what do others think it should mean. Then we have some interventions from 3 cities to share their experiences on how they work with the topic in their cities. Unfortunately, the city of Dakar could not make it. Also, the city of Freetown was another city we were talking to couldn't make it. But we have 3 excellent cities who can share their experiences. Then in part 3, we will go to some RUAF partners who have been working with this topic in their cities. There will be four programs on how do they work with this topic. And then we'll go into a discussion, and I think we have plenty of time to do that, if everybody keeps to more or less 5 minutes of presentation. So that's already for the organizers and also for the presenters. We would like to keep it into 5 minutes and then go into discussion. Yeah, so starting with the presentation, climate change is there and is increasingly also on the urgency of working in climate is increasingly on our net. We face the consequences, we see it every day. We also see that it is there and will continue to disproportionately affect disadvantaged communities. Those who are the least responsible for the climate change, they are feeling the most of the effects of climate change. So the climate justice concept is a concept that addresses this unjust division to make it just, to make it fair, a fair sharing, an equitable distribution of the benefits and the burdens of climate change. And also, and that's also to emphasize in this session, the responsibility, the joint responsibilities to deal with it. So increasingly there's evidence, and the last IPCC report also showed this evidence that the need to act is there, and is really, the need does not only has to be a fair, but also a fast action from the nations and cities. They also show that, and that's a difference with earlier discussions, that increasingly they show there's an importance of building agency of citizens to be able to deal with climate change and to reduce the vulnerability. The last report also showed the important role of cities to act. But they also show the skewed distribution between those who are causing the climate change and those who are feeling the burdens. If you see the pictures above of the ecological footprint and the countries that feel the vulnerability. So this international dimension is definitely an agenda on human rights, on an unjust or a justice session. The question is more transformed into a discussion on who pays. Can we transfer sums of money from the rich countries to the poor countries who are facing these effects of climate change? And in the next couple of weeks in the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, this is a key discussion. This morning I read in the news that a lot of countries are not, the richer countries are not really providing sufficient finance. They cannot find sufficient finance, or they don't want to. And if they have, it's already committed finance. It's not uncommitted finance to the poorer countries. But the discussion is not only on finance, it's also about justice. So then, so at the national level, this climate justice then relates to concerns about the inequitable outcomes for different people, different places, very much associated to vulnerability to climate impacts and the fairness of policies. So the question then more is who has the ability or who has not the ability to be prepared and to respond and to transform under this climate change? So aspects of this climate justice approach may then be changing the understanding who is most vulnerable or not, changing narratives of how to act, working not in multi-stakeholder platforms or in food policy platforms on building the capacity not only to be present, but also to have the capacity to act, to hold each other responsible and accountable. And definitely also the inclusion of the excluded groups, women, indigenous peoples, people in poverty, etc., to be included in that process. And I see the slides are taking their own... it's not really responding, I'm afraid. But anyway, cities here are the obvious places to start. Cities consume most food and energy in their food systems, while they are generating the highest percentage of greenhouse gases. So food is a critical entry point for cities, for making cities more inclusive and climate resilient. And increasingly also we understand that the notion gets into the debate that it does not only has to be fair, but we have to act fast. Well, this is an example from Quito, where from different vulnerabilities, from understanding different locations and different vulnerabilities, if we combine that, we can understand, based on different information, the vulnerability in the areas. And I'm sure that Quito will come back to that in their presentation. So the question is how can we bring the climate justice lens into our work on food systems? Is it already there? What are the key elements? Is it connecting with cities? Is it putting the issue of equity more in the debate? And which experiences do we have and how can we share them? I would like to show one more slide how in RUAF these are a couple of themes that we are exploring on, that we have been working on and that we are also exploring for the future in working on these topics, and they are in the latest issue of an urban agriculture magazine nicely illustrated by different articles. But taking these topics and where the different parties work on in relation to climate justice, we come to questions of, in terms of resilience, okay, we have a better understanding, as was shared in the meeting on a Monday morning, on the vulnerability and on issues to act on when we talk about resilience. But how do we build this and how do we support the capacity building of the most vulnerable people? If we talk about social inclusion, how do we make sure that those platforms, those meeting places in cities where we're already working on, where we have experiences on, how do we make sure that they are impactful and meaningful? In governance, how do we take the discussion that we have on governance and planning to make them better guide and implement the fast and fair changes? Urban agriculture, we have been working all together. Most cities have a lot of experiences on urban agriculture. But how do we understand the impact of climate change on different areas of urban agriculture? But also, on the other hand, how can we enhance and use the multiple values that urban agriculture has to support this climate justice action that is needed? And last but not least, how do we incorporate it in our city planning? How do we make sure that on the longer term, these justice elements are part of our planning? So this is for us a framework of working along. We come back to that also in a later discussion. So now I would like to, this is more a general introduction to get our brains thinking. I would like to hand over to Sam to give us a perspective from a civil society organization working in Nairobi to introduce from your perspective the topic. So please, Sam.
Thank you, Rene. My name is Sam Ikua from Nairobi City in Kenya, which is a RUAF partner, and I will giving you some opening remarks. In terms of climate change, putting ideals into practice. But before we do that, I would like us to track the journey of climate change. Climate change did not start yesterday when this session started or in the 2000s. It goes way back, and that's why it is changed, climate change. What has changed since that time up to this time? And we are tracking this journey from the 1970s when we had the Industrial Revolution, with industries coming up with fossil fuels, burning coal and oil to produce goods. With setting up of these industries, we had people coming in, getting employment and living around urban areas. And that's how you see through industrialization, burning fossil fuels, people getting jobs, and having to stay in urban centers. And up to today, urban centers are part of the major emitters of greenhouse gas emissions due to human activities, including transport. And they emit around 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. So from understanding the journey that has taken place and the change, industrial revolution up to today, we'll also track the question of climate change from 1992, here in the same city, Rio, during the Earth Summit, to the Paris Climate Agreement in 2016, up to what is coming up in November, in COP27, this coming up November. So climate justice has been there, starting 1992, 2016, up to today. It has been there, and what has happened? If you look at the Paris Climate Agreement, we have the question of climate finance, that cities and the countries at large should be given money to deal with the impacts of climate change, but also equip their capacity to adapt to these impacts and how to deal with them, and dealing broadly with the question of climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. So coming to the debate, global north versus global south on climate justice, so far the debate has been very binary, that it is the north that is the culprit, it is the south that is the victim. But that is not quite true. It does not reflect the actual picture. Both the north and the south have been equally culprits and victims, though at varying degrees. In terms of causing climate change, the north has caused so much, over 90%, while the south has also caused, we can say, 3%, and particularly in Africa. So both the north and the south have equally been culprits and victims, although at varying degrees. So how can cities in the north work together with cities in the south. We have had floods in the north, we have had cyclones in the south, which you have had the 3 days we have been here. So that is the actual picture, and it is important we move from victim, culprit, and see that we are all causes, and we also should contribute to the solutions. And this brings the aspect of climate finance also to deal with these impacts and equip our cities on how to deal with this. Now moving from the international debate from north-south coming in on urban areas, and we have urban vulnerabilities. We need to do urban vulnerability index. This is to assess how our cities are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And this is to see what are the risks, what are the impacts. So because climate change is affecting so many sectors of our cities, which include the environment, land, transport system, and coming closer home, it is affecting our food systems. So what is the urban vulnerability index of our cities in the food system, in the environment sector? And when we know that, when we have the data, and when we ask for climate finance, we will know where to target this climate finance. So we have the impacts, we have the data on urban vulnerability showing how we have been affected, and then when we have the climate finance, we'll know where to target that climate finance. If we have this gap on data, then even if we get the climate finance, it will not be so helpful. And this also goes to the question on how now we can build climate resilience through building capacity of our cities and the financial resources that we need, and multi-stakeholder cooperation, research institutions, local governments, civil society, the people themselves. We need financial resources to do this data collection to be able to target our climate finance. And Nairobi, we have a multi-stakeholder platform that is institutionalized within the local government, and we have all stakeholders advising the government in terms of food systems, what can we do to climate change aspects. So this is some of the involvement that we look at. And I will also like to conclude my opening remarks with a song that was done in 1992 by my organization, Mazingira Institute, before I was even born. This song is 30 years old, so you can guess my age. This song is by the children of the global south in Africa, and they are asking, now the north has done this to us, what shall we do to them? And I would like to recite the song so we can get the gist of it. And I will start. It's called the Song of Climate Change. There are changes in the climate, not just politics, raising the dust. What on earth are we doing? And what is it doing to us? Chorus. There is even a hole in the sky where ultraviolet comes through. Are you doing it to me, or am I doing it to you? We are told there are many worlds, some with blessings, some with none. But how can there be many worlds? Now we have proved there is only one. They said, I am in the third world, and I was young enough to believe them. Even now, they have done this to us. There is no way we can leave them, and we need justice. We need justice very, very much now. So what is to be done about it? 1992 must sort it out. Starting to understand it might let humanity show its claws. That is the song of climate justice, and our struggle for climate justice continues even more strongly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. That was a great performance. I took it from you already. Let's go to the next session, where I would like to introduce the next part of the session. Introduce the representatives of the cities: Sarah Pullen of Birmingham City, Marina Borgatello of Rosario City, and Alexandra Rodriguez from Quito. Like I said, we were expecting someone else also to come from Dakar, but unfortunately that couldn't take place.
Yeah, so for this session, we'll hear what the cities have been doing in terms of climate change and their relation to food systems. And the first to share with us is Sarah Pullen, who is the Food System Lead, Public Health Division, Birmingham City Council. Sarah, in her work at the city, she leads the food system team in the Public Health Division. Her role involves strengthening citywide partnerships to develop and deliver Birmingham food system strategy. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks so much, both of you. And it's kind of sad and inspiring, that song, that it's still such a problem even now. But I'm really grateful for you sharing that as well. And it's really true that cities are hugely powerful. We're a huge cause of the problem, but we also are hugely powerful in bringing about solutions. So in Birmingham, we've got a population of probably more than 1.2 million people now. We're about to get our census data, so we'll find out the exact numbers. But we've certainly realised that what we can do as a city is come together and bring about solutions using a whole system approach. Within the public health division, we're very much driven by tackling inequalities. So that's the powerful thing about having a food system team based within public health, is that we're very much driven by that being our driver, not finances and not other pressures within the public sector. So I think that's a very useful way to position food system teams, is where the entire aim of what you're doing is to reduce inequalities. So what we've done is we've created a Birmingham food system strategy. This has been very much weaving together work that has been happening by lots of separate people across the city for many years. And we've been very sure to make sure the narrative is that all we're doing at this point is bringing it together and making people realise they are part of a much bigger movement, which we've called the Birmingham Food Revolution. I won't go through all the details, but you can see some of the messaging that we have on the strategy, and we can share the online link as well. But what I wanted to draw your attention to is very much that what we're moving towards is a regenerative food system. And to achieve that, you must improve the environment, the communities, and the economy. And if any action you have only focuses on one, it's unlikely to be sustainable in the long term. And the other thing is, we also need to make sure that we're not just reducing the negative impact of these areas, but that we're proactively regenerating them and making the entire structure and the foundation of the city much, much stronger. So we can talk more about the details later if you want to catch me, but I thought I'd speak about the exact things that we've done that might work well in other cities. First of all, we've created a very clear joint vision and have connected with the people that are already doing amazing things in the city. This has included having projects such as the food system strategy, but we've also launched the Food Justice Pledge, where not only city leaders in our city, but also leaders of organisations like universities, people who lead on food waste, growing projects, all sorts of different areas, they have also signed up to the Food Justice Pledge. And it means that it gives the clout and the buy-in, that people know that this is a movement that we're all working on together. And we're also currently, the council has declared a cost of living crisis, which is meant, because it's declared as an emergency situation, it enables us to access funding that wouldn't be available otherwise, and also decision making can happen faster. So we're currently working on a huge scale surplus food project to make sure that we're coordinating our approach to waste and the redistribution of food. I've already mentioned the Birmingham Food Revolution, which is very much about capturing, at the bottom you can see the local food legend stories, and using that as the mechanism to say, look what amazing things people are doing in the city already and what we can learn from them. And we've also got two levels of networks. We've got a strategic and operational network, which is the people who are delivering things across the food system in the city and making sure that we're aligning our strategic approaches, making sure that we're all achieving our separate goals. I mean, the message seems to be that everybody has the same vision, but our reason for doing it can be very different. It might be that we're driven by tackling the inequalities with poverty. It might be because of the environment. It might be getting economic growth. But the actual aims of what we're trying to do end up aligning really, really well. And the other side is the Food Justice Network, which it's really sad that the COVID pandemic actually made this happen. So during the pandemic, a network of over 200 community organisations and voluntary organisations came together to coordinate the food parcel redistribution across the city. But actually that network's ended up being incredibly strong, and they now even have an independent funding panel. So where there's funding that comes to the city, they can assess applications and distribute it to the projects that can make the biggest difference, rather than that being decided by people higher up in organisations that are often quite detached. The key learning, I would say, is make sure whenever you've got a challenge, you speak to everybody. And not just every organisation, but absolutely every level. Like the lunchtime supervisors who help the children in the dining hall in a class, in a school setting, have a very different perspective even from the caterers, and then from the catering managers, and then when you look at the wider organisation, and then the city. But each level will bring some solution that is sometimes incredibly simple. For example, how you get children to try different foods in the dining hall can change the entire of procurement. But it's really important that we've spoken to everybody at all these different levels. Also, make sure that whenever you come up with a solution, again, very collaborative, and not just tokenistic, oh, we've spoken to somebody, they said this was a good idea, but actually working out what are the various challenges and how can a collaborative solution help. And finally, I don't know if these slides will be shared afterwards, but I've put a couple of links with the behavioural science side of things. So there's an Achieving Behaviour Change Guide that the government produced in the UK, but it's got very useful additions to the end that you can apply to any situation, including tackling justice. And also the COM-B model, which looks at the drivers behind behaviour, including capability, opportunity and motivation being core to it. If you want someone to do something differently, we need to think of it from that perspective. But I would recommend taking a look at those documents. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sarah. That was in a rapid pace, a lot of information, but great, we can find it later back. I really liked you starting right off with talking about rechanging narratives or bringing together the people into a social movement. We'll come back to that later in the discussion. So we move on now to another city with a long history of working on urban agriculture towards more climate change and climate justice perspective. I would like to ask Marina Borgatello to take the word. Marina is head of the Program of Innovation in Food Quality in Rosario. She's an architect and currently directing the strategic project unit that works under the general coordination of the cabinet of the municipality of Rosario. So maybe you can take the switch.
Everything. Okay. Voy a hablar en español. Muy buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por la invitación a este panel. La verdad que estoy segura que va a ser muy inspirador. Estamos muy contentos desde Rosario con poder tener este tipo de conversaciones con RUAF, con Hivos, con ciudades tan interesantes como las que nos acompañan. Bueno, la idea de esta presentación es poder contarles a través de una experiencia muy concreta cómo entendemos la justicia climática y cómo la trabajamos en Rosario. Voy a hacer una breve mención a nuestro Plan Local de Acción Climática y voy a usar los ejemplos de los programas de producción agroecológica de alimentos de Rosario para aterrizar un poquito estas cuestiones. Los programas que vamos a comentar son el programa de agricultura urbana y el programa de Cinturón Verde. Rosario, ¿se escucha bien? Sí. Okay, go on.
Okay. Rosario is a city responsible that work systematically to diminish the greenhouse gases, people, health, and environmental as well. In a specific way, we are trying to generate a project to diminish poverty and the inequalities. So to us, it is important to understand that both challenges can reduce climate change and inequality. We try to understand the scenario, but in the same way that we reduce the greenhouse effects, increasing climate resilience. So in our city, we take a stand to embrace the responsibilities, so we create a climate action plan as a tool to plan and to manage strategically to diminish climate change or its effects. So we built this plan in a collaborative way, and we take this plan to everybody in all levels. So it is crucial to build a tool in a way that people can participate, including all factors relating to the city. So this way, we are trying to be a resilient city so we can increase human quality life, always prioritizing the people in need. So the production of health food. So in our program, of urban agriculture, we have tools, seeds, we finance, we have equipment, training tools, so people can be, so to reach people in vulnerability, in social vulnerability. We have green areas, so we try to find surfaces who were somehow destroyed and they were improved somehow, so we can add these to any green area in space as gardens, family farms, in different institutions. We also work in a very large process that came up from this crisis that we are facing in Argentina in the last years, starting in the 2000s. So we have two core questions. Firstly, protect all these areas. And second, and we have 800 hectares that can guarantee food production throughout time. We can work with specific norms for this specific soil. So in this moment that the city has been facing, we can prevent this area for the future. So food production, be it inside urban agriculture or in the outskirts, so we have productive areas being transformed into areas that can produce specific services that allows us to fight climate change and generating benefits for us, reducing the kilometers and food transportation, decreasing the fertilizers, and we can use rainwater, the heat, reducing the greenhouse effect, and also benefiting all the clients, creating opportunities to make health food and benefits the local producers and give them power to local garden, especially women. 60% of people who are inside this project, they are from the city, and we have business that benefit producers, farmers. So these initiatives that were being transformed through time into public policies so they can contribute to food security and also create jobs. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Obrigado.
The history of many years that you just passed and showed us in the last couple of minutes. Thank you very much. Let's go to another city, and we stay in the same region, but with a different history. We go to Quito, and we'll ask Alexandra Rodriguez to introduce the experience of Quito. Alexandra is RUAF, Urban Agriculture Project Manager for the municipality of Quito. She is an agronomist and a specialist in business administration and organic food production, and she has been a manager of the program manager of RUAF since 2005. There's many more to say, but I think for the sake of time, please go ahead and tell us about your experience.
Gracias, René. Ok, aquí estamos. Gracias, René. Buenos días con todos. Voy a compartir la experiencia.
I'll share the experience from Quito. I'll talk about the influence to build climate justice. So as you know, cities are a space where asphalt and cement have a huge space. Even more, we see food has to travel long distance. And the cities know less about food production. They don't know where food comes from. They don't know how food is produced. Kids think that the food comes from refrigerator or even a supermarket. So even more, there is more ignorance about food system. And this is a real challenge because cities are facing everyday bad nutrition, food leaves a carbon footprint really important because it's a permanent source, especially when talking about vulnerability, especially for those who live in the poor areas to produce fresh food, seasonal food produced in a sustainable way. This offers means of life and opportunities to entrepreneurs, especially for women that participate, and they have social and environmental benefits, such as it activates the social level and creates environmental awareness, and it increases sociability, especially in Quito that faces climate change. And also, in another social situations, the city being a capital, we have been facing bad situations, and we have been facing issues in the food system because the city has just 2 ways to receive food, and when we face social issues in these places, we don't have food. So when the prices increase, so the city of Quito created urban agriculture project to increase food security for the population through an implementation of gardens, especially in vulnerable areas, as you can see in the map. What we see is bad nutrition, especially for kids. And the darker points shows the gardens in neighborhoods, especially where we see bad nutrition in these specific neighborhoods. As we can see, we can reach almost 50% in red and orange area. So they are trying to implement not only a garden to make food available, but also as a possibility to entrepreneurship. So the project has 13 fairs where the leftovers are taken from different areas in the city. So this project has 2,200 gardens, be it family, from the community. We have gardens in school, health centers, community centers, and rehab and social rehab centers. Every year we have more than 4,000 people involved in gardening and farming. And we have 65 hectares. And we have over 1 million kilos of food.
And I believe this is very important to be said, that the generation of healthy food environments, that the generation of opportunities to understand better how the benefits can reach people, that this has to do with urban agriculture. Urban agriculture is a key to that. Environmental services are also better understood by the population when urban agriculture is put forward. It is important that people feel they're part of the metabolism of the city, that they feel connected, and that they feel that urban and rural areas are connected and can strengthen each other. We have to consider agriculture as a mechanism of green infrastructure for the city and a nature-based solution. This is very important to us. It's very important to integrate urban agriculture to all legal framework regarding climate change, and to integrate this to leisure activities, culture, to cultural identities of the different communities that we have in Quito. So we understand urban agriculture as a place to meet, as a place for people to understand how they can practically reduce severe problems such as landslides or other problems that the city faces. Of course, food services can be tackled by urban agriculture. That's why we put our emphasis on that. There are many types of food products that can be produced: greenery, medicinal plants, roots, and small animals can also benefit of rural agriculture. They can live in those spaces. All of this can lead us to build up healthy neighborhoods, healthier neighborhoods, and turn the dietary patterns of those people more sustainable. That's why we understand urban gardens are very important. The agricultural basis of our production in the city allowed us to understand that everything that is done on an urban garden is important, has to do with adaptation and mitigation of climate change. People have been understanding that composting, for instance, that short food supply chains are important. And at last, we see people understanding how urban agriculture works and how this can really tackle measures of mitigation of climate change. We understand that the urban culture can be integrated to rural culture through tools and instruments that foster resilience, that foster food production, within, of course, a larger framework of climatic mitigation plan. So people will understand that they have the right to the city, and they can exert their right to climate justice and to food access. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alexandra, for sharing city experiences within the context of climate change. We have heard that really urban agriculture as green infrastructure can be key in achieving climate change mitigation. in our own little backyard gardens, we can contribute to collective goals of mitigating climate change within the city. So each one of us has a role to play. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Now we are coming to the question session, so we can get to hear in depth what the cities are doing and what lessons we can learn from that. My first question will go to Sarah from Birmingham City Council. And Sarah, can you tell us a little bit more within the context of climate justice? How can cities in the north assist or work together with cities in the south and increase the cooperation? Yes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I think with Birmingham in particular, we are an incredibly diverse city. The census data is going to show that more people come from outside of our city walls than are naturally people who were from Birmingham. But we've got one of those cities where Birmingham becomes people's home. Like, we just adopt everybody, and then everyone relates to being a Birmingham person. But what's really wonderful about that is that then you truly become a global city. So what we found is that because people have often got existing relationships with their cities back home, with their towns, with their families, you actually get very natural collaboration and opportunities, whether it's business connections or whether it's sharing different projects or learning visits or universities. So I think recognizing that it's not just about connecting cities on a governmental level or with people who are in positions that they're elected, but recognizing that actually the residents of your city are a powerful way to connect. Certainly being part of networks such as this has really helped our city with recognizing the roles of what we're able to do and how we can improve things. I think one of the challenges is that within the way that the UK is set up, the budget that a city has is not even enough for our own residents. So wherever we are connecting with international cities and with other areas, we have to look for external grant funding or connecting through universities, and you have to be quite creative with how to have these projects. And we've been creating like partner cities in lots of different places around the world, and so that we can share learning. For example, we're setting up a network to explore about school catering, both in regards to behaviour change and hygiene and procurement. And we've got a partner city with Johannesburg, so we're developing our partner action plan to see how we can learn from each other and how we can improve. But I think that comes from developing very genuine, authentic relationships with other cities, as opposed to it being something that on paper that you're connected. Actually, it's about truly learning from each other and realising that we are very much a global place. We may have boundaries because of countries, but actually we've got a lot to share with each other, and we're all part of the same planet with what we're trying to achieve.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing with the cities in the South that for climate justice, climate finance should not only come from the government, but also the development partners and the businesses. So those are some of the horizontal linkages that cities in the global South can explore to get resources for climate change mitigation and adaptation. And René?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I would like to turn to Rosario. Marina, you have gone through the, let's say, more than 20 years of going from an economic, you could say, food justice program into a climate justice program. Those are my words. But I would like to ask you, what are the key lessons that Rosario could share with other cities on what are the new things you have to do to consider in this approach?
I believe that the lessons that we have learned have to do with the collective lessons and collective connections that we have developed horizontally. We have integrated many issues and aspects within our city hall. We have been tackling this theme in a holistic way. We have gone to the agents, to the stakeholders, to the key people, and we have integrated them into this new concept. So the city hall has been very key to foster our programs, and they have been talking to the actors on the ground, downstream, listening to them, cooperating with associations of the civil society, working in networks with other cities, learning from other experience, and of course receiving international help and financing to put these practices into place. The theme of vulnerability is our main theme, our main lesson. We have to learn from each other how to tackle vulnerability, how to revert the problems that are caused by crisis that we face, and we have to, since we have to adapt to different conjunctures. This is the main lesson I believe that we have learned from this project, from our program.
There's much more to talk on this, I suppose. But we have to turn to Quito and then go to the next panel. Alexandra, a question for you. It was very interesting to see how you moved from the different services that the Quito city is aware about and tries to strengthen in your city. But we also talked on the climate justice, on empowerment of local communities. How, if you look at the metropolitan strategy, how does the municipality assure that the local communities have a voice in this strategy?
Yes. In fact, what we did was a project of participatory governance. So we brought people in. We've been developing this project for over 20 years. This is the basis of our project, and it is indeed based on the idea that urban agriculture is multifunctional. And we were able to have this in our legal framework, to develop this in our master plan. Our master plan integrates many ideas, and they're population-driven. The population understands that we have a green legal framework that fosters the tacklement of situations. We have indeed a project on green agriculture and green infrastructure, and within this project we have been able to receive many types of funding and to redo the planning of the city. So I would like to say that because of the pressure of communities, we were able to have within the city hall the project of the green network in Quito, which led to the prohibition of agrochemical fertilizers. This has been fostering a change in the communities in Quito.
I have a common question to the three panels. You can take 30 seconds to share with us. You're all doing very good initiatives. You have heard of Food Justice Network in Birmingham, Urban Agriculture Project in Quito, and responding to vulnerabilities in Rosario. So to do these initiatives, what enabling conditions or factors were there, and what lessons can you share with other cities so that they can be able to implement such initiatives? So we can start with Birmingham, then we go like that.
Maybe one aspect we have to.
Yeah, I'd say recognizing what the priorities are of the different people you're talking to, and make sure you speak in their language and align with what they're trying to achieve, and let them recognize that actually they can achieve what they want to do whilst achieving climate justice. So very much speak in their language as opposed to your own, I think is important.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sí, en sintonía también.
It seems very important to identify very clearly what are the communities that are most vulnerable, so that they can be tackled in a fast way. And It was very interesting to see how each one of our cities have been developing methodologies and raising data so that we can act more freely and more and faster. This is very important, to raise data and work upon the data to know who are the communities that are most vulnerable. Then we have to understand how to aggregate data. This is very important. This is an action that has to be taken into consideration so that data can orient public policies regarding the vulnerable. And I believe that I would like to, in a nutshell, say that cities have to indeed establish their vulnerability and work on participatory governance so that every opinion can be taken into consideration. Of course, criteria may at times be polarized, for instance, the interest of communities and the interest of businesses, but it is possible to generate a common agenda, to create the platform for practices to come into being.
I would like to introduce and go to the next panel. We have a session now where people working in cities with programs where RUAF has been involved in. I would like to invite to the floor here 4 people. Alana Santandreo, please. She is the executive president of ECOSAT. He's been an associate researcher, maybe even co-founder of what RUAF is doing in Latin America. And he is a principal researcher in the Healthy Food Neighborhoods project, funded by IDSC with Ricolto and ECOSAT. I would like to invite Mangisa Chirwa. She is the project manager for Hivos Healthy Food Africa in Zambia. And she manages a multi-active food systems lab. She will share some experience on that. We have Jess Halliday from the RUAF Secretariat who is online, and we're going to see if she will start as the first person, so I'm already looking at after this that she will start by a presentation from UK, and hope it works. And of course we have Sam Ikua of the Mazingira Institute. So please, Jess, if you can hear us or see us, or otherwise somebody can type to Jess to start the presentation.
Hi, everyone. I think that's my cue. And I'm sorry that I can't be there today with you in Rio. I guess you have my presentation loaded up. I'm talking today, great, I see it. I'm talking today about the City Region Food System Assessment and Planning Programme, which is a joint programme of FAO and RUAF, implemented with the support of 2 of the RUAF partners, the Water, Land and Ecosystems Programme of the CGIAR Research Institute, IMI, and the Laurier Centre for Sustainable Food Systems at Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada. Core funding is provided by the German government. So the first phase ran from 2015 to 2018 and focused on overall sustainability of the food system in and around cities, taking a territorial approach. The second phase began in 2019 and is focused on building resilience to multiple shocks and stresses that can impact people, assets, and infrastructure within the city region food system. So we started looking at climate shocks and stresses, and then we pivoted to include pandemic-related shocks as well, for obvious reasons. Across both phases, inclusion and social justice have been really integral to our perspective. This diagram is a depiction of the city region food system. In the center, the central circle, are the urban-rural linkages across the city region territory. The middle circle represents all the activities, the stakeholders and infrastructures and exchanges at and between all the food supply chain nodes. And then on the outside, we see the outcome areas or the wider issues that food systems can influence. That is food security and nutrition, livelihoods and economic development, environmental and ecosystem services, and social inclusion and equity. Additionally, multi-stakeholder participation is a core pillar of the programme. As you can see, stakeholder dialogue and governance are central or fundamental to all the modules and activities in the assessment and planning process. So a stakeholder advisory group is made up of representatives from various government sectors, levels of government, food value chain nodes, civil society, academia, private and financing sector, media, and so on. Stakeholders come together in multi-stakeholder workshops. They develop a shared vision and determine priorities. They build scenarios. They determine the research, the assessment methodology, and agree on priorities for action. They perform an ambassadorial role to build awareness of the city region food system. In addition to the social inclusion and equity and participation as core pillars, I want to show now how climate justice is really central to the assessment methodology and outcomes. So the example on this slide is inspired by the pilot project in Kigali in Rwanda. When we design the in-depth assessment, we start from a priority area. In this example, the priority is building a food production sector that has the capacity to withstand climate shocks and stresses. One of the indicators of this is the number of farmers who are equipped with water harvesting techniques at the community and household level. So this indicator can be simply translated into a quantitative question: how many farmers are equipped with water harvesting techniques? But we don't just want to know how many, we want to know which farmers. So we need to break it down to a set of qualitative questions. Which farmers are equipped? Which farmers are unequipped? And why are some of them unequipped? This essentially shows us who the people are that are vulnerable and lack resilience capacities to climate shocks and stresses, and why they're vulnerable and lack these capacities. And it's the answers to these why questions that show us the causes of vulnerabilities and unjust differences in resilience capacities. And it's these causes that then need to be addressed in action planning. So the kinds of actions that might be considered then are maybe organising training courses for specific groups close to where they live, or providing free childcare to attendees of training, or providing accessible microloans, or raising the income cut-off point to access equipment subsidies. I'm sure we could collectively and with the farmers themselves come up with a lot of other potential measures that could help address these causes. So while each action should have its own monitoring mechanism, ultimately we would then expect to see progress with respect to the quantitative question and the indicator. We are seeking to encourage stakeholders in other cities and city regions to take up this approach, which has been piloted so far in 11 cities across both phase 1 and phase 2. So more information is available in the forthcoming handbook and online toolkit. And with FAO, we are instigating a series of city-to-city exchanges and aiming to promote shared experiences in building resilience and climate justice across contexts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jess, and also a big hand to the technicians who made this possible. Thank you very much. We will now turn back to the presentation live. There will, luckily for us, there's no other external one, but I would like to go to Samuel. Samuel will take us to Nairobi, where he will also discuss the experience of a Resilient Cities initiative, a program we do with the CGIAR. Please.
So I'm going to present to you the Resilient Cities initiative, which we are doing in Nairobi, and it's funded by CGIAR, that is Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research. We are doing this also with International Potato Center in Nairobi and also RUAF. We basically want to see how we can make our cities resilient against climate change, against COVID-19, and other shocks to come in the future. Basically, within the Resilient Cities initiative, We have 5 work packages. What you have there on the screen as 5 technical domains, they are also called work packages. We have a work package on food production. We have work package on informal food markets, how to strengthen the informal food markets that they achieve the quality that is required for food safety and other food dimensions. We also have a work package on biocircular food waste systems, and also a work package on healthy nutrition and diets. And lastly, we have a work package on research and innovation capacities. Those being the broad work packages of the resilient cities, we have RUAF involved basically on work package 5, that is on governance, including research and innovations. And we have 2 main outcomes from this work package that is being done by RUAF. The first one, we have to do a city assessment. We have to know what is the food system profile of Nairobi and Dakar. What is going on, what is working, what is not working well, and how can it be improved. And that will be in the agri-food system profile. The other key outcome that we want to do is to develop a monitoring tool of the food system in these cities. What are you doing about climate change? What are you doing about involving the people in participatory governance? So this monitoring tool that we are developing will be used to monitor these aspects. And it would be good to say that we are not creating this tool out of the blues. We are adapting the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact indicators as well as the FAO City Region Food System. We are adapting those indicators to develop a new improved tool that focuses on shocks such as climate change and COVID-19. So the key highlights from our work in Nairobi City County Government, we have an institutionalized multi-stakeholder platform. And it is important that we make a distinction. This Food Liaison Advisory Group in Nairobi, it is established in law. It is not just a group there somewhere that is doing advocacy, but this is established within the structure of Nairobi City County Government, and it has the backing of the law. So people are able to participate and have their voices being taken into consideration. That becomes very important in establishing these participatory platforms through law and also in the institution mechanisms. Among other things, the food system profile that we'll do will feature the circular economy approach and how doing organic recycling, organic waste recycling, recycling manure, how can it contribute to climate change mitigation? We'll also, in this profile, map the process through which a global south city like Nairobi can do advocacy for climate finance, to do an assessment to build the capacity, adaptation capacity as part of climate justice. So what are the steps? We have the impacts, we have to do assessments to know the urban vulnerability of Nairobi in terms of climate change to food system, and how can we, when we have this data, we target climate finance to build the adaptive capacity of Nairobi, and that will contribute to climate justice. So the monitoring tool, as I mentioned, will be used to capture climate change aspects and make recommendations for building adaptive capacity to climate change impacts.
Thank you very much, Sam. And there is a session as we are sitting here also ongoing in another room of the Resilient Cities program together with the World Bank. But I think it was important what you emphasized, that this research, there's a lot of loose research ongoing which needs to be very much under the responsibility and serving what is ongoing in a city like Nairobi. It's also going to take place in other cities. So this was a good illustration of how we try to position this under the flag in Nairobi. Thank you very much. Let's turn to you, Mangisa Chirwa, and tell us a bit about the Healthy Food Africa program and how the food labs that you are working on are related to the citywide actions.
Thank you very much, René. Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here to share with you our experiences from Lusaka. So I will be talking to you today about the Healthy Food Africa project, and I thought maybe just to give a brief overview of what we are doing and where we're coming from. So the aim of the project is basically to promote sustainable, equitable, and resilient food systems. It is funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Project. So we are working in a consortium of 17 partners. We have 5 research institutes, 7 universities, 3 NGOs, and 2 private sectors. So you can already see from that that we are trying to be a multi-stakeholder, to have a multi-stakeholder approach to this promotion of healthy food throughout Africa. In terms of the countries where we are working with 10 food system labs in 6 African countries. That's Benin, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, and Zambia. So I will be giving Zambia's experience today. Also, just want to give probably a brief background of as Zambia, where we are coming from and how we decided to take our approach in this Healthy Food Africa project. So we did a lot of building on the research that was done by the City Region Food Systems. I think we were one of the countries that benefited from that program, and it was a really good baseline to tell us where the gaps were in terms of our food system and where our interventions really needed to be. So besides that connection with the City Region Food Systems, it also helped us in this project to sort of not just focus on urban areas, but also see how the urban areas are related to the peri-urban areas nearby. So for the Healthy Food Africa project, we are in Lusaka, the capital city, but we are also linked to the nearby city where the food, most vegetables are coming from, and that is Chongwe. I will show that connection in a little bit. So also building on what was already happening within the food system, we had a project called Sustainable Diets for All. It was funded by the Dutch government, and it was mainly an advocacy and evidence-based project. So we did a lot of research that sort of brought out, again, what are the gaps in Lusaka's food system, where do we really need to prioritize, and building from that, we saw that we needed to focus on sustainable farming methods from the nearby Chongwe, where this project is focused, and also mainly on access to markets. It was identified as one of the major challenges, and also the fact that there was an absence in terms of coordination for policy. So we had different ministries dealing with food-related problems, but there was no coordination, so you'd find that they would be working against each other. So building from that information, the Healthy Food Africa project sort of brought up a program that would that was overseeing what were the gaps from the different sectors, and then looking at how we would address those gaps in this project. Also, a very important aspect that we are working on is the use of the food system labs, like I indicated. I think many of us in this conference have talked about the multi-stakeholder approach, but I just want to make a little bit of a distinction between the stakeholder platforms that we are running, that we are calling food system labs. What is important with our sort of multi-stakeholder platforms is the fact that they are experimental platforms. So most of the multi-stakeholder groups that you will find, they will sit together and talk about issues, but sometimes there is a lack of taking things forward. When you discuss, you identify the problems together. How do you move forward? So the difference with our multi-stakeholder labs is that we use them as experimental platforms where once we talk about what are the issues and what are the possible solutions, we actually try to implement within that platform and with the participation of everybody involved. Further to that, I think another very important distinction with our multi-stakeholder platforms is the way that we make sure that we are including the most vulnerable people in the platforms. Mostly you would find multi-stakeholder platforms that will just focus on the technical expertise. Yes, everybody is represented, but usually the voices of the very vulnerable are not taken into consideration. So when you look at our focus in this project, we are working specifically with traders because the researchers that were brought up by the City Region Food Systems Project and also the Sustainable Diets for All project showed that we are getting most of our foods from the informal sector. But we don't have any participation of any of the traders. So our multi-stakeholder platform is really working with the traders themselves to make sure they are bringing out the issues, they are giving us the solutions, and together we are experimenting on how can we improve the food system. Then with the farmers in Chongwe, we are also just making sure that they are part of the process of coming up with the solutions to the problems that we identify. Now I will, the other distinction which is really important on our multi-stakeholder platforms, apart from inclusivity and also on working with everybody else, is the fact that we try to make sure that we are incorporating the traditional values and the traditional solutions. So you will find, for instance, with climate change, people will come with, maybe you can implement this and that, but with our multi-stakeholder platforms, we make sure that the cultural values that are already there, we seek to understand them and then seek to together work on how do we move forward with those experiences. Now, just talking a little bit more in detail, I would like to focus on the distinction on the distinction in terms of understanding of issues between rural areas and urban areas. I think the city region understanding was really important for us. So when we're talking about climate justice, for example, when you're talking to a rural setting, it's really easy to just say, you can see the change in patterns because most of them are farmers, so they can see the change in patterns. And when we are doing our interventions, we are talking about organic agriculture, so they can see the changes in their yields, and it becomes very important for them to probably sustain further the interventions that we're doing. But in Lusaka, where we're working with urban areas, and you're talking about climate justice, we have realized that with the traders that we are working with, it's not such a direct link. And sometimes they feel like they don't have a responsibility or they don't have a role to play in relation to climate justice. So we are really working very hard to make them understand what their roles are in climate justice and how they need to advocate further. So, for instance, I'll give an example of energy use. We are working with traders, and when we talk to them about climate justice, they totally don't understand what is this climate justice, what does it mean for me as an individual. And so we are working really hard to make them understand that the energy that you are using, for instance, which is coming from trees that are coming from the rural areas, it affects how the climate eventually relates to how you can feed your families. And therefore, when we are doing urban agricultural projects, then they can really understand that this is part of their responsibility, and we cannot just go on and say, you know, in terms of climate justice, we are sort of how can I say, disadvantaged, like this problem was brought on us, but we also need to take some sort of a responsibility on how we can work to mitigate the climate effects. Also, another important intervention that we are doing is on climate finance. So we are giving capacity to the traders and the farmers that we are working with to take advantage of the local government's budgets to sort of look into how they can access climate finance to become more resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mangisa. And it's also interesting to see how the linkages are being made by the Lusaka Food Policy Council and to work in these food labs directly under this Food Policy Council platform. I hope next meetings of the Milan Pact, Lusaka City and Kitwe City can be part of that. Yeah, let's go to the final presentation, which is by Alan Santandreu who will inform us about the neighborhoods project that is taking place in Quito and Lima. Please, Alain, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Renee. Good morning to everyone. Good morning. Well, feeding and food is foremost a political act. We need a revolution that will put the fight for the human right to feed. We have to put this together with the rights of nature and the rights of the city. As a humanity, we have decided as humanity to put our food systems in private hands, and that led to the situation that we have a debt to people in regarding the right to food. So our project, Healthy Food Neighborhoods, we have developed with sectors, with NGOs, and we understand together with them that we have a common fight. And we are based on locations where injustice can be seen most clearly, where people have difficulty in access to food, and that leads to problems of climate justice. The healthy food neighborhoods are spaces in which we can develop our rationale, and we decided to do that in over 7,000 hectares in Quito. And we have been working on this project for a couple of years now, so that we can understand better how neighborhood woods work, how we can define them, how we can understand the importance of those places for feeding the people locally. Those healthy food neighborhoods are gardens that can be established in urban areas, in peri-urban areas, and also in rural areas. We heard from Alessandra about the food vulnerability in Quito. Quito does not produce food products. What we have is the incoming of products from Lima. But in our city, there are peri-urban areas in which food could be grown. And we have found possibilities within the urban perimeter in which food could be raised, could be grown. I will talk about Peru. Of course, Quito is part of this project, but I would like to talk about Lima. We have 11 million inhabitants, and it is the second largest city built upon a desert. And the peri-urban area in our 3 mountain chains, in these places we have lost over 8 million hectares of arable land. Lima produces only 3% of greenery, which is consumed by the city. FAO data of this year tells us that in Peru there are over 20 million tons of food that are wasted per year. And I close my eyes and I imagine a community of over 20,000 people wasting or not having access to this food. That is 12 million tons of food is wasted in Lima. And we have 16 million people in situation of severe food insecurity. People that probably yesterday went to bed without having one meal. So this is something that we cannot tolerate. We cannot tolerate this. We cannot keep up with this. This is not possible. We have to do something about it. We cannot accept that this is kept in this manner. Of course, we have big cities, we have diverse cities. So the idea in Lima was to understand how neighborhoods work, what they would need to be empowered to produce food. Here you have a map of the city of Lima, and you can see on this map on the slide a healthy food neighborhood spot unit in this neighborhood in the near of a river. As I said, we have a city of 11 million people, and we're working here with one neighborhood of 11,000 people. And the idea was to see how neighborhoods, for instance, during the pandemic, how people could access food, since during the pandemic, public policies didn't reach these people there. So we hurried to guarantee some sort of food access for these people, especially during the pandemic. People were experiencing hunger during the pandemic. So we conducted a study to understand how this neighborhood works and how we could create food justice in such small neighborhoods. So we mapped food offerings, the food existence in this place, and we noticed that even when people had food in their neighborhoods, they didn't necessarily had access to food. So we established the healthy food neighborhood projects in those areas and also in peri-urban areas, so that people would see and understand the concept that they could reach out to food, that they could be connected to rural producers, that they could have access to the agri-food system. We try then to shorten supply chains, reduce the number of intermediaries. We reached out to the city hall to make them understand that those people needed to be also recipients of public policies. We developed social kitchens, soup kitchens there. Soup kitchens in Lima feed over 350,000 inhabitants in Lima. People receive their basic foods such as rice and other products that are on the basis of our food system. But the problem was that during the pandemic, especially, we noticed that soup kitchens offered to the people that came in there foods that weren't healthy. So on this point, there was the need also for change. The experience of developing healthy food neighborhoods and to connect this to justice climate was very important to us. We saw a clear nexus. Of course, if you tackle logistics, you will be able to reach some sort of betterment. But the thing is, we have to try to make people understand that justice climate is a cultural act. There are many things that we can do, of course, but you have to act also on the political level. We saw many problems on the political level. We have to try to contribute to a more food autonomy for these people. Of course, we can connect people into hubs, and this will help people to be more resilient in their neighborhoods. We're trying to study Lima better. We're trying to have access to more data, but we don't have sufficient data, unfortunately. But we're getting there. I think, at last, that our fight is a huge fight, and it is an unequal fight. It is a huge fight because we're fighting a food industry that benefits from what we eat, from what we buy. The food industry produces more food that can be commercialized, so it can destroy, it doesn't bother to destroy traditional knowledges of people. But before the pandemic, we know that the food industry destroyed or wasted 7 million tons of food. Of this 12 million tons of food that I mentioned that were wasted in Peru. The budget of the Peruvian state for 2020, 21, and 22 for processed foods is huge. And actually, I'm sorry, it is not as huge. And what we see is that the food that's been bought is ultra-processed food. We have to do something about it. We have to change the situation. Thank you very much.
How important it is to make the connections between neighborhoods and large-scale problems. We were very ambitious trying to have 20 minutes of discussion with the audience, one of the first sessions to have an interaction with the audience, but I have to confess that we also failed, and we were told by the organizers we really have to make sure you get your coffee before going to the final session. But I still would like to ask you to bear with us for another 2 minutes, and I don't think it's bearing, it's just listening to a wrap-up of Joy Carey, our RUAF associate, to make some conclusions of our session. And before handing over, I would already thank all the panelists for their interesting contributions, and you for being with us. And please take your questions to the coffee audience after Joy has given you some food for thought.
Thanks, Renee. I just wanted to share some wrap-up thoughts. So these are things that takeaways, practical takeaways that have been given to us by this amazing panel of speakers. It's been so interesting. So I heard urban agriculture is a mechanism for change, for doing having many multiple outcomes. We need to protect land, we need to provide training tools, seeds, we need to allow and enable enterprise to generate income. I've heard it's about genuine relationships. Sarah, you came back to that a number of times, whether it's personal or city to city. We can do those things. It's about us. We need to plan ahead at a city level. Planning ahead is so absolutely critical. We need to really understand who is most vulnerable, dig into those details, use our data to be effective in our actions for trying to bring about change. And we need to understand and hear from everybody. I think we've heard that from every single person on this panel, involving and hearing from all the voices to really get all the perspectives, because that's where the innovative solutions actually come from, the ones that are going to succeed. Manziga talked about experimenting with promising solutions and trying to enable them through providing finance to experiment. We've heard about connecting up, building on previous projects. I think this is something we often forget. We get a big new idea, we think that we're the first person that ever thought of it, and we forget to read the previous project, which was pretty similar. So learning, building on data, reports, what successes have happened. It's a personal responsibility to every single one of us to find out what has gone before. And if we don't, we're really wasting resources. So that connecting up, building up, coordination, we've heard a lot from the speakers, really trying to enable practical coordination. We know it's difficult, but it's a must. And then finally, I think we've heard very much made a point from Alain that food waste, actually, it's an offense. Of course, we have to see it as a resource and use it differently, but this is a serious offense. We need to be offended and shout, I think Alain is saying. Alain also mentioned traditional knowledge. I think that's also come out from some of the other speakers in terms of urban agriculture. We really need to champion and understand our own traditional knowledge and skills from the past, because these give us solutions. So I think I just want to say massive thank you to everybody. Thanks to Jess, who wasn't here in person. Thanks to all our friends and supporters. Thanks to Renee. Great job, Sam. Massive thanks to the panel. And my final thing is, there was mention from Jess about the city region food system approach on climate resistance. I have a few brochures here. If you want to take, please I'll try and stand at the door. So can we please say a really big thank you to everybody? Coffee time.
Do not forget to take the chart for climate justice song. It's on the seats. Yes, let's take a picture.
Mejor adelante para que no salga la mesa, sí.